Thank you, and good morning. Nice to see everybody again. I think a lot of what I have to discuss today is some things that you may be aware of and some of the other things you may not be aware of. So really the topics I want to touch on are Adam Wainwright, staff changes, Nolan Arenado, and then maybe a little bit of what 2023 looks like for us. So, starting with Adam Wainwright, obviously we're super excited that he's coming back. I think some of you understood that he did have interest in pitching again. He and I started talking about this, early September. Obviously the September didn't go as the way he really wanted it to, but we really do feel like there's something left in that tank, and we all know how competitive he is. We know how special he is in that clubhouse and what he means to this organization. So, just glad we were able to get it done. I think he can have a normal off season. I spoke with him this morning. He's excited. He's energized, and obviously, you think about how we look at our roster next year, you're always going to be needing pitching, and so having him come back is certainly helpful for all of us. Now, staff changes. I'm sure you're all aware, Skip Schumacher is now the manager of the Marlins, so that's going to create a hole at bench coach. Jeff Albert has chosen not to return. Mike Maddox will be stepping down. He's not retiring. He was not fired. He wants to do something different. He wants to do something at a different pace. Brian Eversgerd, he will be reassigned within the organization and will work as a special assistant. So clearly we have a lot of openings, 4 to be exact, bench coach, pitching coach, bullpen coach, and hitting coach. So what's next steps? Next steps are, obviously, we've got to put together a list of candidates who we think can fill that. We will look internally and we'll look externally. We know we have some qualified people within the organization, but we also want to make sure that we're addressing all our needs. And so we've been aware of this for a little bit, but we've done some preliminary work on it, but clearly there's more to do. And, so we'll keep you up to date as that process unfolds. Nolan Arenado, you guys are all aware, he has an out clause in his contract. I went out and met with him on Monday just to discuss the situation, and very hopeful there's some resolution here shortly. And finally, the 2023 roster. We know there's work to do. We know we have to do some things to improve our club. We didn't finish the year like we wanted to, but there was a lot to be excited about in 2022, but we have to turn the page. We've got to move on. There's obviously some obvious needs. We're going to have to address the catcher. Have to look at how we want to augment our offense, and then also, as I mentioned earlier, you're always in need of pitching. So that'll be our focus as we enter the GM meetings and work our way up to winter meetings. So at this time, be happy to take a few questions.
Well, when you brought Jeff Albert in, you wanted to develop an organizational philosophy for hitting. Will the foundation of that philosophy remain in place, or do you want to change things from the foundation of the philosophy?
I think Jeff accomplished exactly what we were hoping him to do. He modernized our hitting program, our strategy. I think he made a huge contribution to our minor league side. So I think from that standpoint, it was a success. I think, when you look at what was happening up here at the big league level, I think, people were tough on him. It wasn't an easy job. Our offense was good this year, though. I mean, you compare it to the league, and it was good. And so, I was hopeful he would come back, but I think, for personal reasons and just, wanting maybe to try something different is really why we are where we are. But I thought the combination of him and Turner were good. It was good. I think having the different voices allowed players places to seek advice, and so that standpoint. So as I look to the future, I could imagine that we're going to try to find something that resembles a little bit how Jeff thought, and hopefully we can address that need moving forward.
How would you characterize your talks with Nolan? Is there potential for a reworking of his deal there, or?
I would just say that I'm optimistic that this will have a positive resolution, and like I said, I hope that's something that we get some news on sooner rather than later.
What's the timeline on that as far as
5 days after the World Series.
the free agency?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Were both Albert's and Maddox's contracts up?
Correct.
Well, what are some of the personality traits or expertise that you'd like to find in a pitching coach? What are some of the things that you would like to do with that? And would it all be akin to what you did with Albert?
A little bit. I mean, I think one thing you learn along the way. I think clearly going in and running before you walk can sometimes be dangerous. We sort of learned a little bit of those pitfalls. But look, I do think like on staff right now we have Dusty, who is very progressive in his thinking. So we already have incorporated some modernization of that. And then when you lose somebody like a Mike Maddox, you right away realize you lose that wisdom, that experience. And so trying to find that right balance on what that really team looks like moving forward is something that we're going to have to try to address.
The coaches that you did not mention by name, you expect all of them back?
Yes.
And their roles might shift, is that?
It's possible, yeah.
You've historically rewarded your coaches in the minor leagues with promotions up here. Would you anticipate that, if you had to guess right now, that will be the predominant way that you'll fill these over here?
I don't know. Historically, that is something that we have tried to do, but I think in fairness to this process, we have to explore both inside and outside. I don't think I anticipated that we were going to have these 4 openings as we sit here today. So you have to zig and zag and adjust. But speaking with Ollie this morning, even though we're losing some key people and people that helped us be very successful, you really have to approach this as just an opportunity, right? And you hope in the end it allows you to be stronger and more prepared for the future. So that's how we're going to have to think about it.
And Mo, with this offseason free agency and trades, does the missing the World Series drought enhance or change your approach to this offseason compared to previous ones?
I don't think I'd characterize it as, because we haven't been in the World Series in a while, that we're going to rethink our strategy. I think we always go into the offseason understanding like what our urgency should be. It might not be the same as yours or maybe public perception, but we know that we had a successful season. We know we did not have a successful October. But I think we all as fans realize no matter how well you play in a season, there's no guarantees you're going to have a successful October. So we'll certainly try to address the club, try to improve it wherever we can, and hopefully over the next 3 or 4 months, we can call that a success.
Can there be a simultaneous pride in the way the team plays in the regular season, and the flip side, a simultaneous, I don't know if the word is anger or frustration, of how the team continually doesn't make the NLCS or even win a game in the NLCS since 2014?
I think that's your narrative. It's not mine. Mine is that we win baseball games. We get a chance to play in October. A lot of teams can't say that. And, we'll continue to try to put together a roster that gets us there, and we hopefully, have more success in the future.
The commission raised have there been any surgeries on players or surgeries that are planned in the offseason?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well,
So no.
with both hitting coaches, pitching coaches, was there any common theme there? Because teams that win a division, win 92 games, it's a little surprising
Yeah, I would say both have their own separate narrative. I think in Mad Dog's case, he's just done it for so long. He's just really looking for a change of pace. I think in Jeff's particular case, I think there was some levels of frustration and feeling like took a lot of the blame when things weren't going well. And for him, I think he's just open to change.
Did you try to reassure him that, like, that you have this, was the blame you're talking about outside forces? Or-
Yeah, I mean, I was prepared to offer him a contract, but before I even got that out of my mouth, he had already told me he wasn't coming back.
Does he have another job? Do we know at this point?
I don't know.
Well, you mentioned Dusty by name. Would he be a candidate to take over?
Oh, he certainly would be a candidate. Yeah.
Do you see also candidates in the system to take over Jeff's position as well, Russ Steinhorn, for example?
Yeah, I don't really want to get into like all the names, but as I said earlier, I do feel like we have internal options, but we also want to understand what the outside world looks like.
Along with the concept of staff changes, it's been a while since this organization needed a catching instructor for obvious reasons. Has there been any thought of adding one to the 2023 staff?
There's been a lot of discussion on what we might also do at the minor league level, but we have not made any firm decisions on what that looks like. But obviously, not having Yachty running our catching program in spring training, there could be a need for that.
The two teams that did make the NLCS, to kind of piggyback on what Benjamin was asking about, they had fewer wins than you, but they were still top 5 in the payroll. Has the payroll dynamics of the National League changed when you look at your payroll versus the other teams that were in the postseason? There's a substantial gap. Do you feel the need to close that to remain competitive?
I think the good news is we anticipate our payroll going up next year. I mean, I know it will. Obviously we had a lot of success at the gate this year, so thank our fans for that. You get past the pandemic and where we are today, we're definitely one of the few clubs that from a attendance standpoint got close to pre-pandemic numbers. And so, yeah, I definitely know that our payroll will go up.
Has the bar changed to be, like, you have both the schedule changing next year, you have playoffs changing. I mean, is the bar elevated in the National League because the top 2 seeds get the bye and all that?
I think look, it's a long season. You have to build a roster to do that. I think asking these sort of almost to me like trivial questions on should something like make us rethink our strategy or how we go about it. Internally, we talk about things all the time, but we know what we can do, what we're capable of doing, and we're still going to be a pipeline-driven organization. We're still going to try to draft well, and if we can do those things, we think we can continue to have the success we've had.
It's possible that you maintain your strategy and then augment it with spending.
I've already said our payroll's going up. I don't know how else to answer that.
No, I guess I'm just saying that that's a fair characterization.
That's a fact. Payroll's going up.
So Randy, and then we got Benfred, and then John will get to you after Randy.
Well, since the day that you got here, the Cardinals had a pretty commanding presence behind the plate, whether it was Pags, Matheny, Yachty. Defensively, guys that could really handle the pitching staff. Philosophically, is that still really important in the game and to you? And is that what you'll be looking for? And would you take offense behind the plate at the expense of that?
Yeah, I think we debate that all the time. Even when we had Yachty, we were understanding the trade-off of offense versus defense. But having an elite defender or Hall of Fame catcher really for the last 20 years has been something that's very special. As we look at what that market might look like, it's going to be very difficult to just say, oh, we're replacing Yachty. There is definitely some offensive upside possibly in that, but we don't want to take a huge step backwards defensively because we've built our club around defense.
Similar question, what did you see out of the guys who will be back at that position or could be, and how will that factor into what you guys do in looking at outside catchers?
I mean, I think Kiz did a nice job, but when you're looking at an everyday catcher, you're hoping you can find more there. Herrera, young guy who got experience at the big leagues this year, but I still think there's some development that needs to happen. And, he's a little bit of a different profile in the sense of swings the bat really well down at AAA, but when he came up here, we weren't seeing that offensive production. So I think there's a maturity curve there that has to happen. Still bullish on him, but not sure you could just say, let's pencil those two in. I think there's more opportunity out there.
Do you have any more info on what happened to Paul Goldschmidt over the final month of the season, not just postseason, but if you guys have more feedback than just trying to grind it out?
Not really. Obviously, I think he would tell you that was a frustrating way to finish. And, I think like as we sit here and debate whether it's payroll, how do you build a team for October, a couple things I think are pretty obvious. You need your better players to be playing well, and you always need somebody that you don't expect to step up. And anybody that was sort of a part of our 06 team can remember there were side stories of people doing that with I.E. Spezio, and you think about 11 with David Freese, and you're looking at current teams right now that are competing for the World Series, and you're seeing how they got hot. And so, look, when you really take a minute to unpack 2022, we played September flat, we went into October flat, and we got eliminated. And that's reality. And now I don't think that means we have to totally rethink how we build a club, but what can we do differently to either create more depth or breadth of that lineup, and subsequently how do you try to avoid those pitfalls?
I didn't know if you had any help, if you had any health concerns that came up here and after.
No, nothing.
Okay, let's see, we got John and Jeff, we'll still get back to you guys. John, go ahead.
Well, you talked about augmenting the offense. Is there something missing that you pinpoint as the number one concern? Do you need more pop from your corner outfielders? Is it a guy who gets on base more? Is there a thing that sticks out more in your head than others?
Well, the obvious is we're losing Albert Pujols, right, to retirement. And, you look at his season, it was almost a tale of two cities, right? And clearly that second half, he was really carrying our offense, and now that's gone. So, when you talk about protection to Goldie and Nolan, that's a real question. And then, you look at our outfield production. I think, Newt definitely distinguished himself, and that was exciting to see. But, overall production, I do think we need more of.
Well, with Adam returning today, he made a pretty lengthy public statement after the season where he identified a flaw that he found in his delivery later in the year that had maybe cost him the struggles he had. What was your reaction to his identification of that, and was there frustration that it wasn't found earlier and he spent a month maybe spinning wheels trying to find it?
Well, I actually knew he was going to say that well before he published it. Obviously, I kind of respect his answer though. He has a process that he does on his own that he's had obviously tremendous success doing. He got away from that a little bit, and clearly performance suffered. The good news is he feels like there is something that he can physically do differently, and clearly that gives us more confidence in bringing him back. Does that answer your question?
It is. I guess the question, what is the way to find that earlier? Is it a matter of just Adam's process, or did you identify maybe when you fell down?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people were blaming the coaching at that point. I understand that's a fair question. I think though, when you really understand Adam's process, he's not leaning on pitching or coaching as much as maybe a younger player might. And so I don't think placing fault here is as important as at least we have an answer, and now we're moving forward.
Okay, we got Benjamin, then we'll go over here to Martin after Benjamin.
I know with Nolan Gorman playing in the bigs at just 22 last year, can you share what you've seen out of him, what his trajectory is heading into next season?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of things we liked about what we saw out of Nolan this year. In terms of, I think he played a pretty solid second base. I feel like, from an offensive standpoint, we still think there's a lot of upside there. Clearly, I think he was frustrated with how the season finished. You look at his strikeout rate, his contact rate. There's some things that clearly he can improve upon, but I think you really touched on it. He's 22, so I think we can be a little patient with him, and certainly his off season, he knows what he needs to work on, and hopefully he can seek and get the help he needs to improve. No, I don't think it's about reworking the deal. I just think it's, he's just trying to use his time and sort of sort through some things. He asked some questions on, how we were thinking about the club, what we're thinking about in the future, topics like, how are we going to deploy our resources? And again, it was a very positive conversation. I'm again hopeful and optimistic that we can come to a place where we're both happy and have that understanding. But he just wants a little time to think through that.
So it's as simple as either he opts out or he doesn't?
That's correct.
All right, Claves, and then Frank?
Mo, do you have a timetable on filling the coaching vacancies? And, will you look at the roles of these coaches in a different manner than what the ones previously had positioned?
Timetable is TBD. I could imagine, the next couple of weeks we'll be working feverishly to get this done. In terms of could some of these roles or definitions of these roles change, the answer is yes. Certainly depending on who we identify and how they fit in, we'll really determine how we think about that job description.
Frank?
Well, how do you look at Tyler O'Neill at this stage of his career, and will the organization do anything differently in the offseason to try to do something about his injury history?
Yes. I think Tyler has a chance to be an exciting player, right? We saw glimpses of that, but obviously 2022 was not the year that he wanted, nor the year that we wanted for him. So adjustments have to happen. And I think the good news is he's going to be in St. Louis a lot of this offseason, so he'll have access to our training staff and be able to come down here and work at Busch. So I'm excited that he'll have that opportunity for prepping for 2023, but clearly something has to change and he has to do something different.
Daniel, and then Commissioner.
Mo, down coaching staff and minors, is that largely going to stay the same, or are there any changes?
Right now, I would say it's pretty close to complete. There'll be a few changes, obviously, but we're still working through a couple of those hirings. But in terms of the overall look of it, it'll be the same. And there could be, some promotions from within. So they're not quite ready to put it's all done yet on it.
Some of the minor moves in elected agents, you guys have made a decision on, or any news on what?
We'll have our final roster discussion tomorrow in terms of who we are thinking about adding and who we're thinking about re-signing. So yeah, ongoing.
Commissioner, and then Matt.
Relative to the outfield, how does Dylan Carlson become a better left-handed hitter where he can be the player you expect him to be? And how much was he affected by injury last season?
I think he definitely was affected by his wrist. There's no doubt that he didn't have the year he had hoped for. I think he tried to grind through it. But, clearly we hope to see more. When you're looking at our overall outfield production, it wasn't where we envisioned it, especially, when you flip back the calendar 1 year and as we were planning on what 2022 was going to look like. So, we still think we have talented guys, but, things are going to have to change, and hopefully he can come into the season healthy. And, I hope he's actually not swinging a bat right now, letting his wrist rest, and then, when the time is right, he can get it going again.
At the end of the season, you talked about how well the coaching staff work together. As you're identifying candidates, especially with still relatively young manager, how important is it to find guys that do fit and continue to have pretty good working relationships with everybody?
Yeah, I think this past year was tremendous in terms of what we saw down in the clubhouse. The working relationship was extremely positive. Even though I'm saying that, we have all these changes, so it's a bit odd, I know. But, I do think that's important. It's such a unique business, right, where, you play 162 games over 187 or 184. You're together so much, and so relationships do matter. And I think it's, you look at successful teams, they tend to have that good, healthy relationship. And, for the most part, a lot of these guys that are leaving, they're going to be missed. But, they're leaving for a reason. And so how we backfill for that is something that I think is going to be very important. And I think if Ollie were sitting here today, he would tell you that he does value that. Yeah. And Berkman and Beltran. Yeah, don't have a plan yet. Don't have something we can just go follow. But, look, you look at our offense, I think the key is how do you protect Goldie and Nolan in that lineup? And that's just something that we're going to have to look at.
When you think about your lineup or your field, do you see two spots that are accounted for and the rest are open? And how maybe odd is that for a division champ?
I'm not sure yet. I mean, I definitely know we need a catcher. How we else redeploy, that'll be time will tell.
Could you, Edmund's versatility, does he change where you could go shopping in the middle infield? Is outfield up for grabs?
I think, right now we have a lot of talent coming with Walker, Wynn, to name a few. And so I got to be very careful on what we do this offseason in terms of, making sure we still create opportunity. But, we're not there yet. We have still time to discuss and how we want to think about redeploying our resources. And, as we start to explore both free agency and trade markets, we'll have a better idea what that looks like in the near future.
Okay, we got Frank and then Randy.
You just mentioned Jordan Walker. We know how you talked about him in the past. With some of the things he's done in the fall league, has he expedited the learning curve that there's a realistic chance he could go to Jupiter actually competing for one of the 3 starting outfield spots?
Yeah, I think it'd be silly for me to rule out any possibility with him. He's had an incredible year. He's, from a physical standpoint, he continues to get stronger. From a performance standpoint, he continues to have success. So in terms of trying to think through a ceiling for him to where he might begin next year, I just don't think that's fair to him or us. But, we're definitely excited about what he's bringing to the table, and certainly glad we have him.
Mo, your best pitcher has had 3 lost seasons in a row in Flaherty. Because of that, do you need to get more protection for him? And what are reasonable expectations for Flaherty?
I think the good news for Jack is he finished the year healthy, and he feels like he can have a normal offseason. And I think that's good news. And I think the way he finished throwing was super encouraging. So I'm not going to run away from the comment I made earlier. You always need pitching. I'm not going to go here and tell you we have this figured out, that we have plenty of depth, because depth gets tested. But I am very excited about directionally where he's at mentally, physically, and I'm excited about what his 2023 year will look like.
Okay, we got Jeff, and then we'll get over to the Ben and Benjamin here after that.
Well, as you talked about a catcher in the year that Kisner had last season, is it fair to say that you're looking for a catcher that could start the 100 or 110 games, and you would prefer to see Kisner in more of a backup role than an 80-80 sort of split?
Again, it just depends on what we can identify. If we can find someone that can make that kind of impact, that would be great. If we can't, then, Kisner may get more opportunity. But, clearly, I thought Kiz had a nice season. First time he really got to play at the big league level, got tested. He knows what he needs to do this offseason. But as far as how we pair someone with him, time will tell.
Benjamin?
Obviously, you mentioned that the more pitching, the better depth and all that. Having said, is it kind of weird on October, whatever today is, that you theoretically have your 5 starters written in pen?
Well, normally I'd gloat about that, but I don't want to. I think that's good, but I know that, we're going to have to add to this. So, we're not drawing any conclusions today, but we're excited that we know we can go win with 5 if we had a break today. Good news is we don't have to break today.
Does the flexibility of some of your infielders, Edmund, Donovan, ability to go the outfield, does it allow you to kind of prioritize what kind of bat you want as opposed to maybe what kind of position player outside of catcher?
It does to some level, but I think the way we want to look at this is, from an offensive standpoint, where can we make a difference? And also, understanding, looking at performance from this past year, how can we extrapolate what that performance might look like for next year? And so I think with being patient about this, clearly, if we could have something that gives us a little protection, if Dylan doesn't get it going from the left side, just having that open-minded thinking that we're not getting to May or June wishing we had done something.
How important is it to have a left-handed hitter in your lineup who you play every day and maybe make your offense better against right-handed pitching?
Which is sort of what I just touched on. So I would.
If you're a left-handed hitter, not going to be switching.
No, I understand that, but someone that can make that impact from the left side, I think would be something that we will try to identify.
Martin, did you have another? Yeah, would Matt Holly make sense in some of these roles? Is that some conversation you would have? He expressed it.
I mean, I'm not going to go into potential candidates right now. In terms of how we fill some of these roles, it's something that we're just starting to talk about internally now, and I will keep you guys posted as we finalize our decisions.
Jen, you got one more here?
John, how do you view your setup at shortstop? I mean, obviously, you have Tommy Edman, who handled the position capably. There's big free agents at that spot again this year, just like last year. Do you feel like you need to go add to that spot because Tommy can play other spots, or are you good there with Tommy possibly being your everyday shortstop?
So the question is, are we in the shortstop market?
Yes.
Clever way of asking. Now my clever way of answering it, and I think right now is we understand that there are options out there. How we decide to deploy our resources is still something that we're working through, and having players like Tommy Edman definitely give you flexibility because we know he can play other positions. But one of the things you have to understand is when you move him off of short, and where do you move him to? And when some people throw out the outfield, I mean, then are you really changing your offensive profile? And the answer is probably not. And so, ultimately, those are the things that we have to internally decide. And as I mentioned earlier, good news is we have a little time to think through that.
Okay, Randy and Jeff, and then we've been going here about 30 minutes. We'll probably wrap her up.
Hey, Mike, just from a global perspective, how much do the rules changes impact the way you build a team? Now, you talked about Gorman, you hope that he can play second, but with the pitch clock, with the bigger bases, how much does that affect the way you construct a team now?
I don't think the rule changes are going to affect how we think about our roster all that much. I think maybe a year from now we might more because we get to actually see it. I mean, obviously the biggest thing is going to be how defensively people play with the shift. And then I think left-handed batters, do they actually improve because there's the lack of shift? But I think one of the things that we'll all probably just pay attention to is the game being played differently or not? But as far as we enter this offseason, we won't radically rethink how we put our roster together.
Go to Benjamin's question about having 5 starters, paying up 10 then right now. Arguably, you have 6, depending on how you look at Dakota Hudson and where he fits in your pitching forward. So what do you see?
Again, I've sat up here before with 11 we could name, and that worked out well. So, we're not overconfident. We know we can add to this, and that's how we're going to approach it.
With Dakota in particular, how do you look at the season he had there?
Look, I think Dakota can be a starter at the major league level. I think when he picks up his pace, when he throws the ball over in the strike zone, he's amazingly effective. So, I really like him. I think, he's a great option to have, and I hope he gets the opportunity to start.
All right, take one last one. Daniel had asked. Let's get him.
No, I mean, one of the kind of overall bigger developments with the minor leagues is unionization. I mean, do you know what that could look like, just from an organizational standpoint, you guys?
Not really. I haven't really heard much about it other than it's happening. I think, you hope it positions players to have a better environment for growing as a player. I think, Major League Baseball has done, huge steps over the last few years to try to improve that with housing, with food, with travel. So I guess the last frontier is pay, and so we'll see how that unfolds. Well, I think from a housing standpoint, we did a nice job. I mean, I think we were all drinking from the fire hose last year when we realized we were going to have to do that. I think from a nutrition standpoint, we've taken great steps forward. And so, I think overall, the minor league experience for our players has been positive.
Well, thank you, Bob.
All right, thanks, guys.